Architecture and design decisions. Architecture decisions typically have far-reaching consequences. Yeah. I think they always have far-reaching consequences. Once things are implemented, it's expensive to undo them. Yeah, time-consuming migration. Yeah, definitely. Still, often we don't take time to elevate enough options and fail to ask for feedback. The most popular tool may not necessarily be the best one for the problem at hand. Okay, so don't rush implementing the first design drafts or the most popular tool. Do take time to evaluate the architectures or designs are good candidates for the problem at hand. Run proof of concepts, ask other engineers, stakeholders, external consultants for feedback, test various options in practice, and then decide what works best. And if you're building on serverless, then do use, yeah, of course. So essentially, yeah, that plug, that was a good one, wasn't it? That was really clever. I don't mind reading it out. I mean, look, they've written if you're building on serverless, then do use dashboards, well-architected insights tool that give you real-time reports. In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll do a little advert for them. You ready? Okay.
Test various options in practice and then decide what works best. And if you're building on serverless, then do use dashboards, well-architected insights tool that will give you real-time reports on your infrastructure's architecture based on industry best practices and will tell you exactly what, where, and how to improve. How about that?
There you go. That's what they get. They get baby voice. Okay. Where are we? Look, architecture is a really hard one to solve. There is no sort of one solution fits all. Yeah, I see what they're saying here. They're essentially saying it comes back to the whole, you know, do you guys, what do you do for your front end? Oh, we just use React. And it's like, because it's just what everyone's using. And it might not be the best. It might not be the best tool. You know, why not look at Vue? Why not look at Angular? Why not look at Svelte? You know, there's so many different options out there for building front end UIs. Why just pick React? Oh, it's because Facebook uses it, and it's like, okay, you got to look at different options, right? You've got to decide what is the best tool that works for you. But at the same time, I do agree with things like. At the same time, I do agree with things like, well, we picked React because it's popular. It's sort of like 50-50 swings and roundabouts, because if you look at it this way, and this comes back all the way back to what I was saying earlier about ultimately you work in a business that's solving problems, which means it's essentially, it's pure economics, it's just the transfer of wealth, essentially. People come to work to make money, and so they're going to pick tools. They're going to learn tools and use tools that are going to get them work. And so if companies are using really obscure esoteric tools that not many people are using, and for example, think someone writing a web API in Java, PHP, Node, or Python versus Haskell, what do you think? How many Haskell developers that can do REST APIs do you think? How many of those do you think exist in Toronto or London or Brisbane versus Java developers or PHP developers or Python developers or JavaScript developers, Node.js? So there is a certain valid argument in, well, we're going to go with React because ultimately it's what everyone's using. I can see where they're coming from there, because it boils down to sort of economics 101. It's sort of, if you have a pool of talent that all knows Node.js with a few Haskell developers in there, and then you pick Haskell, if your Haskell developers leave because they're unhappy with the culture or management or they get better offers, you're going to really struggle to find people who can then maintain that code, or you're going to have to pay a lot of money bringing in talent from the existing economic pool of talent, and you're going to have to spend money essentially upskilling them in Haskell. That might be different in R&D departments or in-house project. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look, if you've got an in-house tool and you've written all of your front end in React and all your back end in, let's just say, Python, and then you have an internal tool and one of the developers says, why don't we look at Go? Why don't we look at Golang? We're thinking of porting our Python backend, our REST APIs into Go. So why don't we write that internal tool that we need in Go, and then we can use that as a learning exercise? And so, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's what they're trying to say here is, don't just pick what's best. You've got to find good candidates that solve the problem. And I guess what I'm saying is that is true, and there's just also an economic reason why companies will just pick AWS, and while they'll just pick GitHub, and while they'll just pick React and JavaScript. It's because everyone knows what AWS is, and it's got a huge market share, and there's a huge pool of talent that you can hire. Everyone knows who GitHub is. Most people who've done anything with Git will have a GitHub. Everyone knows what JavaScript is because it's the only option in front end development today. You've got web assembly and you've got cross compilation, but what does the cross compilate into? JavaScript, and everything. Everyone knows all of these high level tools. Everyone knows what React is, and so you're increasing your chances of being able to hire people. And you're increasing your chances of, as you've said here, as Julia said, time as a factor is also true. Like if you've got an investment in your business to build an MVP for a product, and you've got 3 months to prove it, you're not picking Haskell for the web API. You're not picking Svelte for the front end. You're not picking Alibaba Cloud for your cloud provider. Because you're going to struggle to find people that know those things well enough today to get an MVP in place in 3 months' time. You're going to be picking all of the tech that just gets you going. Another thing to consider as well is if you have a large talent pool, of JavaScript developers in your local city or town, their wages drop. So businesses will pick things like, well, we're going to pick React and JavaScript because for every one person that can write Svelte or can write Haskell, there are 10 JavaScript developers. And so there's this sort of supply and demand model within economics that has to be taken into account as well. But yeah, no, I agree with this. This is something that we definitely need to be spending more time on as engineers is looking at all of the available options.